One day I'm over here and they called me from my law office to come over to close up and sure. So I come over at 5 o'clock, I'm locking things up, and there's a knock on the door, and there's a guy wearing a shirt similar to yours. And he goes, "Are you guys open?" And I go, "I'm kind of closing up here." And he goes, "Hi, I'm Greg Peterson. Hi, I'm Paul Sarbanes."
Oh, no kidding.
Like, "Senator Sarbanes?" He goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I was at Chautauqua spending a few days. I read about this and I thought I'd come down and see what it's all about." And he goes, "Come on in." Needless to say. So he comes in and he goes, "Well, I got to keep moving, but I'll come back tomorrow." I said, "Yes, please do, and I'll be ready for you." You know, because I want to interview the Paul Sarbanes of Sarbanes-Oxley and all of that other.
Yeah.
And on the Judiciary Committee. So it was a perfect opportunity, and it turned out he brought in a buddy with him who goes, like you were saying, you know, talk to my husband. He said the same thing. "Yeah, I might be a senator, but so I'm not the guy you want to talk to. Talk to this guy." You go, "Why? Why would I want to talk to him? What's the reason?" He goes, "Well, he was the counsel for the creation of the Peace Corps. He and Sergeant Shriver were best friends. So why don't you talk to him?" "Yeah, I do. That's a good idea. Senator, why don't you take a walk?" And so it was just one of those crazy days in the ballpark. So let me tell you, Eddie, are we on?
You're on.
Okay, we have Judge Seitz and Al Greer, husband and wife. And the reason you have a different name is why?
She let me keep my maiden name, and that she's been very kind. We've been married as of this past Saturday 40 years, and I think I'm getting off probation.
Ah, good enough.
Hope springs eternal.
They're at Chautauqua. They're just had a tour of the Jackson Center. And maybe, Judge, just for the record, what's your sense of Justice Jackson? You saw the tour here, but you also have a little background.
I've been a long-time admirer of the man, just simply because of the beauty of his writing, the thrust. He represents an ideal of what a humble justice who is able to convey very, very simply and so eloquently the importance of justice by all of us towards all others if we are to have a more perfect union. And he's somebody that's not saluted a lot because he was so humble, and he left the bench with his sudden death in '54. But every single prosecutor and then every single lawyer has all heard and read his letter to prosecutors as to what is the goal of being a prosecutor and really being a lawyer. And as a past president of the Florida Bar, it became ingrained in me the importance of lawyers as civil priests and rabbis of our society, and the importance of the high ethics that he just simply manifested.
I'm very proud of Pat. She was the first woman president of the Florida Bar. She had to run statewide. At the time there was 56,000 lawyers.
54,000.
54,000.
Wow.
She won by a Texas landslide of 930 votes.
So how did you guys meet?
We met on the opposite side of a case. My firm and I were representing B.B. Rebozo and John Ehrlichman in the Watergate cases. You know, did the Watergate trials in front of Judge Sirica. And in the process of this, the Washington Post had published we said was a libelous article about Rebozo and his bank and lending. We sued the Post for libel, and Pat and her partner, Sandy Dallenberg, were defending the Post.
I was a young lawyer at the time, and I thought that he was the fork-tongued devil. Because, you know, young lawyers usually see everything in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
As you become more experienced, you realize with human nature, it's a lot of shades of gray.
So, talk to me. B.B. Rebozo is a name that I certainly was very cognizant of in my youth, and I never thought I'd be thinking about BB Rebozo today. And so, did you have a chance to interact with him, or?
Oh, I knew him extremely well. We represented his bank and him. He started out in World War II as a flight attendant for Pan American and discovered Key Biscayne off of Miami when they first built a bridge out there. And he started a bank on a shoestring. And as part of that, the way he got the bank charter was he became friends with Senator George Smathers. And Smathers would bring John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon and a whole bunch of the luminaries down to Key Biscayne, and BB had kind of a retreat where they could be private. And so he got to know all these people, and he became the closest friend of Richard Nixon because he wanted nothing. And as a result of all this, when Watergate broke and Haldeman and Ehrlichman got prosecuted, Ehrlichman engaged us to defend him, and Rebozo was in front of the Senate Watergate committees, and so we were up there defending Rebozo in all those hearings. But he was a very, very private person. But if you were his friend, he was your best friend. He was a very nice, honest, quiet guy.
What was the substance of the article in the Washington Post that led to the litigation?
They Post alleged that that the bank had sold stolen securities
Knowingly.
knowingly. And we said, no, he didn't know. Pat and her partner got a summary judgment. I had been somewhat out of the case defending Westinghouse in the uranium litigation in Richmond, Virginia. Got back in, I got it reversed, the old Fifth Circuit.
But in the meantime, after the summary judgment, my partner Sandy had been invited to go on a professional exchange to China in 1980, because Sandy was then the head of the ABA's Legal Education Division. And Sandy didn't like to travel at that time, and so he said to me, I mean, you've been my protege, you go in my stead. And I thought, wow, this was literally, China had just passed their constitution and their 7 laws. Their legal library was that thick. And so the chance to go was fantastic. So the State Department was concerned that we might embarrass the United States, these 36 judges and lawyers. And so they would have these little training sessions before we went.
And I was part of the group because I chaired the Florida Bar's International Law Committee.
And there were in this group of judges and lawyers 2 single women and 6 single guys. Well, one of the single guys, a lawyer from New York, decided that he and I would make a wonderful couple. But he forgot to see if I agreed with this. And he would call my secretary and ask to be put through, claiming that he was a member of the family. And I was quite concerned that this 3-week trip of a lifetime, where the group is together from 7 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, that this was going to make it a miserable trip. And I was bemoaning this fact to one of my law partners, Bill Keegan, and he said, well, isn't Alan Greer on that trip? And I said, yes, why? And he says, I think you need to talk to Alan. And I said, the fork-tongued devil? Are you kidding? And because it had been about 5 years, and the case was getting ready to go to the Court of Appeals. And Bill said, oh no, you have him all wrong. I've been on the opposite sides, I've been on the same side. He's a class act. You need to talk to him. Well, I really didn't know him personally, but I knew his law partner very well, as we had been active in the bar. And so I called him up and I said, can you arrange a lunch? So we went to lunch and I explained to him the problem with this New York.
She asked me to help, and I said, certainly, my dear.
And I'm very, very grateful that I did, because the group gathered in San Francisco for the 15-hour flight to
Yeah.
Hong Kong. And Bert, the lawyer from New York, I probably should not say his name, but I didn't say his last name. He came up to me and had 2 boarding passes for the 2 of us to sit next to each other for the 15-hour flight. And I thought, oh my God. And I walked over to Alan and I said, do something.
She said, do something.
He had never told me what he did, but he managed to get the boarding passes shifted. Later I realized some money must have gone under the table. And he whipped me onto the plane. He sat on the aisle, I sat in, and Bert came down and was looking at his boarding pass, looking at the seat number, looking at the 2 of
He
us.
looked at me, and I went,
The devil made me do it.
And we, at the end of 3 weeks, I realized my partner was right on. That if I didn't have a chance to spend some time with him, I really felt that I was missing out on something.
Yeah.
But then he asked me out, and I thought, this is going to spoil a great friendship. And we got married a year later.
Good for you.
and now I've been married 40 years.
Yeah. Terrific. Now, your practice was principally litigation?
Completely.
But
That's all we did.
now, was it white collar stuff, or was it?
Well, we had a small firm founded by my partner that I tried these cases with, Bill Freites, and Peter Fay, later judge on the U.S. 11th Circuit. And they built it up, and I went to the Naval Academy, spent 6 years on active duty. My last year in Vietnam, and went straight from Vietnam to the University of Florida School of Law in the span of 10 days in September of 1967. Thought law school was the easiest time of my life. Classes 3 days a week, and nobody was shooting at me. But Bill was trying, my first quarter in law school, was trying a case in Tavares, Florida, and his associate was a friend of mine, and he invited me down to watch the trial. I went down, case got settled the end of the first day, and Bill said, come have dinner. At the end of dinner, he says, what do you want to do when you graduate? I said, Mr. Freites, I think I want to be a trial lawyer. He said, do you have a job? I said, no, sir, I don't. He says, you do now.
Yeah.
I never interviewed with another firm, and I've been with that firm or its successors. The last name was Richmond Greer.
Yeah.
Ever since. I never moved.
And what kind of practice did you have? Litigation?
I was the first woman that Steele, Hector, and Davis. It was McCarthy, Steele, Hector, Davis when I accepted the offer. And they had never hired a woman. In fact, they had turned down Janet Reno, and when she, with her Cornell law degree, or Harvard law degree, she went to Cornell undergrad, had applied there back in the 60s. And because of Sandy and John Edward Smith, my 2 mentors in the firm, they had a St. Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. And I'm very, very pleased that 18 months after I was there, the firm invited Janet to be their first woman partner. So I got to practice law with Janet Reno for about 18 months before she became the first woman to be the state attorney in the state of Florida. And then when she became the attorney general, a friend of ours, Bill Clinton, convinced to become the drug czar.
Barry McCaffrey.
General Barry McCaffrey. Yeah. And I can still remember watching the State of the Union, and when the president announced that he had convinced Barry to become the drug czar. And I turned to Al and I said, what did he say to persuade Barry to leave being the SYNC commander for Southcom to take this no-win job? And shortly thereafter, I get this phone call from Barry saying, hey, would you take a leave of absence from your firm and come and help me jumpstart this office? And I said, Barry, it's been 25 years since I've been in D.C. I have no experience in the criminal law. I have some experience, the work that I've done in the community on mental health and substance abuse, but you really need somebody who knows DC, who knows this area of the law. He says, no, I want you to think about it. And I said, well, can I talk to my former law partner about this? Because he hadn't been confirmed. He said, this is not an offer. I've not been confirmed. And he said, well, who's that? And I said, Janet Reno. He says, oh, yes, you talk to Janet. So I called Janet and I said, what do you think? And she wanted to know, how do you know Barry McCaffrey? So I told her the story of how I knew him. And she said, well, what does Alan think? Because she and Alan had been racquetball partners back
really?
before we had gotten married. And we said, well, both of us want to know what you think. She said, do it. And so
We didn't hear anything
Thing
for a
of-
couple of weeks. We came back from a trip on a Sunday night, and there was a phone message from Barry saying, "Are you coming?"
I need to know. And so Alan said, well, we need to have a real serious discussion about this. And so we went walking. It was about, February night, about 8 o'clock, so it's dark. And we're caught in the headlights of friends of ours who live a couple blocks away. And they stop, and the wife rolls down the window and says, I want you to be the first to know I've just agreed to be president of People for the American Way, and I've taken a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in D.C. Come and visit me. And I turned to her and I said, Carol, would you like to have a roommate? Because one of the things that
Sure.
we've been talking about is that, this is a significant pay cut. You're going to need an apartment up there. We sort of like each other, so that means flying back and forth every other weekend. And suddenly, as we're walking back, Alan says, I don't know what this means or what we're supposed to do, but I said, God sends, back in those days, faxes.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
But I've been very proud of Pat. She and her trial partner, a fellow named Frank Scruggs, who was African American, who would go in, and all these low-lying Miami trial attorneys thought, boy, easy meat. And she and Frank would cut their throats, and they didn't know what happened.
but always very politely.
Yeah.
They were a tremendous trial duo.
We had the privilege of representing a lot of people that formerly, large corporations that formerly the white male in the 3-piece navy blue suit, and so made for very easy, like
Sure.
shooting fish in a barrel. And suddenly they didn't know what to do with us. We had a particular expertise in defending the Florida Power and Light in child injury cases. We were always trying cases right before Christmas because the judge always wanted us to settle.
Yeah. Perfect. But while you're there in Washington, you also get an opportunity to go on the court.
Yes.
I mean, you went from private practice, 20 plus years, like Jackson. Next thing you know, you're called to Washington reluctantly. You go ostensibly probably for a year, like Jackson, and next thing you know, things happen.
Right. Well, it's at the end of the year, Barry says, can you stay on? And then about 15 months into the mission, Alan says, all of the flight attendants know me by my name. So I found a replacement for myself, and I decided to come back to Miami, because Washington's a great place to visit, but normal people live outside of Washington. And I was saying to Barry, talking to Barry about what you're going to do, and I said, if I had anything to do, I would like to be a judge.
Let me interrupt. Pat clerked for a U.S. District Court judge after she graduated from Georgetown Law.
Richie?
Yes,
And
my father in the law.
when he was dying of cancer, we went to,
The year that I was up there, he came down. He was diagnosed with spinal cancer, and
But-
decided he was 75 and didn't want any heroic treatment. So I had that privilege of being able to visit with my mentor, my father in the law,
Yeah.
before he died.
He took his oxygen mask off and made her promise that she would go on the federal bench. And then he left her his rose.
Wow.
And he died in March. And in June, our former chief judge, what's Rutger's first name? Oh, Norm Rutger, suddenly announced he was appointed by a Republican, surprised everyone by taking senior status. So the seat became open. And so I said, okay, I made the judge a promise, I'll apply. And so I applied. I made the 3 cutoff. The seat was in Fort Lauderdale. And I get the call from the senator saying,
Bob Graham.
I've decided to appoint Bill Dimitrileus, who was from Fort Lauderdale, to that seat. But I'd like you to apply the next opening. And so I said, fine. The next day, Clinton nominates Stanley Marcus from Miami to the 11th Circuit. And I went, okay. So I said, if God wants me to do this, then I will apply and it'll happen. And if not, I will have fulfilled my oath,
Sure.
my promise to the judge. And it happened.
Wow. So what's the segue? We've had a chance to talk, we've had several district court judges here from, especially the Buffalo area, Scranton and Arcara, and ask, because they were all private practitioners, you know, day one, you go from front of the bench to the back of the bench. How did you adjust?
I am forever grateful to Sotomayor. Before she was a Chief Justice, before she was an Associate Justice, she was a district court judge. And she did a magnificent introduction for baby judges. And I remember seeing that, and I went, thank God somebody is honest about the fears that you have, where suddenly you're out there and everyone is looking at you and you're supposed to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I am forever grateful to the federal public defender and our U.S. attorney at the time, because I had no criminal background. And they gave me their best assistant U.S. attorney and assistant public defender, and we just have an excellent criminal bar in the Southern District of Florida. And so through them, I'll never forget, let's put it, my first week on the bench. One of my colleagues gave me a trial-ready 4-defendant criminal case. And I thought, I know selecting juries in criminal cases is different than in civil cases. So one of my longtime girlfriends was also a judge on our district court. And I said, Ursula, what do you do? She said, come and sit with me. So I sat with her while on the Monday, she was picking the jury. I got a copy of that transcript of her doing the voir dire. And I read it 17 times that night, so that it was rhythmic, and I sort of knew what I was supposed to do. So we got the jury, everything was fine, and then on Friday, I guess about midway through the trial, suddenly Bruton, it was a Bruton, not a Batson, a Bruton says, we have a Bruton issue. I'm going, what's Bruton? And I said, it's time to take a recess. So I got off the bench and I took the elevator up to one of my new colleagues, whom I had appointed before he went on the bench to a grievance committee. And he was a great criminal defense lawyer and a prosecutor before that. And I said, Don, what's Bruton? And so he said, gave me a quick course, and so went back down, was able to take care of that. And then on Friday of that week, I had told everyone I don't want any sidebars, because the courtroom that we were in if you had been designed in circular with the jury right here to the right of the judge and the witness, so that the witness was across from the jury. And the judge had to get off the bench and go down to the court reporter, and the lawyers would come and you would talk quietly, but the sound would carry right around
Sure.
to the jury, so they heard everything at the sidebar. And one of the defense counsel said, Judge, I need to speak to you. I said, we're almost getting ready for a break. Can you just hold on for another 10 minutes? And so he says, fine. 5 minutes pass. He says, Your Honor, I need to speak to you now. And I said, and just the tone I could tell, this is some. So I said, okay. Told the jury, just give us a moment and I'll get down. And he said, my client wants to plead. And I thought, I've never taken a plea before. What does that mean? And so I'm looking at the faces of the U.S. attorney and the four criminal defense lawyers, and fortunately one of my colleagues, Bill Hoovler, who was then a senior judge, had lent me his court reporter, who they had been together for some 30 years. And so Jerry is sitting there and I said, what should I do? And Jerry says, take the plea. And so I said, okay, it's almost lunchtime, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We're going to take our lunch break. And then I figured out what I could do was let the jury go home. I could then get out the judge's, baby judge's book,
Okay.
and practice a plea colloquy.
Yep.
And so that was my first week on the bench.
Oh, how wonderful. And she remembers it, you can tell.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Did she come home every night and talk to
She
you
came
about
home
that?
and said, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
But
Did you give her little tips while you were there?
Heck no, I was a civil trial lawyer.
So you're out there by yourself, man.
no, it's and the first 6 months as a judge, you're walking down, the street or somebody, and somebody says, Judge, and you go, oh my God, who am I? Because you're still thinking like a lawyer,
Yeah.
But it is a good reminder that you notice that people start laughing at your jokes because
They'll take your phone calls.
yes.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with you personally. It has to do with the office, and so you need to act in a way that respects the office.
But Pat has never thought that her first name was Judge.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Sometimes you get into just in the nature of the position, things covered by the public. And, your reporters now all of a sudden cover your moves, covers decisions you made. And, I hesitate to bring up the subject, but I will. And you've been quite visible in.
Well, before you get to her on that, I need to tell you a story.
Okay, I'm listening.
My partner and I tried one of the Bush versus Gore 2000 cases
Well, that's you. Yeah.
in Tallahassee, which was the most surreal experience of my life because there were satellite uplink trucks up and down every street as far as you could see, and the reporters haunted you. In the middle of this trial, one woman reporter for a national station wanted to interview me, and I had to go to the men's room. And she and her cameraman were following me, and she wouldn't give up the interview. I go into the men's room, I'm standing at the urinal, I have to look over my shoulder to make sure I'm not on national television.
Well, it begs the question. You're all over the YouTube regarding the Carnival Cruises thing.
Oh,
I don't want to. You don't have to comment
good.
on that at all, other than you're there. But that's publicity. And likewise, you're in a case like Bush versus Gore, that's huge publicity. And dealing with the public's alleged right to know is how to balance all that. I mean, you're in the trial business, and the judge is a little bit different, but you're kind of
It has two sides. Like going back to Bush versus Gore, at one point, some lawyer in Chicago decided he had the argument that would win our case. So he knew the judge's name, Nikki Clark, and called to get her chambers number. And he got her assistant and told her this was an emergency. It was a family emergency.
Mhm.
And so she sends for Jerry, my
His-
partner.
her-
She sends her bailiff in to get Jerry. And his mother was very ill at the time, and I said, Jerry, I think your mom's died. And he goes charging out, and 10 minutes later he comes back, smoke coming out of his ears. It was the worst idea he had ever heard. But at the same time, two NYU law school professors were watching the trial, and we had the absentee ballot case.
Right.
And they had the entire senior class at NYU, over 24 hours, research every single reported absentee ballot case in the United States. They put this into a compendium and FedExed it to us, and it was enormously helpful.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
So,
Now, what side were you on?
Bush,
Were you,
Gore.
Gore?
Excuse me, I gotta say Bush. It's my two biggest cases. I lost both of them.
yeah, we didn't get back to the Washington Post. Did it end up that?
oh, he got it, it ultimately, he got it reversed.
Yeah.
And then by that time, we had started dating, so I got out of the
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
And it ultimately
it
settled.
settled.
So,
I was no longer,
yeah.
and he's never told me, other than I knew that.
Everyone who'd ever listened to this tape would wonder, Greg, where were you? I didn't ask the follow-up question. Where did that? And so the hanging chads. I mean, did you ever actually see one? Did people bring them up?
Oh yeah, we had bags of the fallen chads and the voting cards that they came out of, and
Yeah.
you could see how they had dimple chads, and it was a whole science.
Yeah, wow, what a flashback.
Mhm.
And you were in the middle of all that, and now, the case ultimately, we know how the Supreme Court ultimately ruled, but at your level, what was the question before the court that you were involved in?
Well, we had the Seminole County case, which was a little different than the hanging chads case. We had, the Seminole County had let every Republican voter that had improperly filled out their absentee ballot request come in and
Cure it.
cure the defect. They didn't do the same thing for the Democrats or the Independents.
Mm.
And between the two, there were more than enough votes to turn the election. And at the end of the case, the judge ruled that while they had clearly violated the law, the remedy was so severe,
Of throwing out everyone's.
throwing out every absentee ballot, that she couldn't do that, and so she ruled in favor of the Bush side.
And that was part of the case that went up.
No, we were not part of the Supreme Court case.
Okay.
We had a separate track. We were in the Florida Supreme Court, where they were getting ready to hear our arguments when the U.S. Supreme Court shut everything down.
Got it. Piece of history. P.P.
Mhm.
Raposa, Bush, Gore. And do you have, again, I don't want to.
No, right. But I have a strong support for journalism. I think that the fourth estate
Yeah.
is critical to a democracy, to have balanced factual reporting so that you can have an informed electorate. And I worked my way through law school covering the Supreme Court. And
Georgetown law.
so at Georgetown, I was in the Dallas Times Herald Washington Bureau and had an incredibly wonderful boss, Margaret Meyer. And I had been hired just to send, initially, just send the
Telexes.
to telexes back to because we were afternoon newspaper. And she came in one day in my first year of law school, and she said, would you be interested in covering the Supreme Court? We'll pay you extra. And I thought, forget the extra money.
Sure, what
To be able to sit there in the press gallery for all of the oral arguments. I was the envy of my classmates. I didn't really spread the news too much, but so the case that I remember the most is I was there for Roe versus Wade, because that was a Texas case.
Yeah.
And I can still remember seeing Sarah Weddington. She was the first woman that I'd ever seen in a courtroom. And she wasn't much older than I, because I had worked a couple of years before going to law school. And it just really had a powerful impression on me. And then working with Sandy, I think some of the reasons why he sort of thought that, and I know that the judge was interested in hiring me because of my reporting background, is that influenced me now in the way that I write opinions. And I tell all of my law clerks, that first paragraph of the opinion, I want the guy that is on a deadline or the layperson reading to understand what was the nut issue that you're deciding and what was the outcome,
Right.
with a one summary sentence of, and he said that paragraph is the one we're going to write last. But that way, if they're on a timeline, and if you can write it in simple English, active verbs, then you're writing the way I want this opinion drafted. But also Sandy Dallenbert, who had been the president of the ABA and dean of the FSU Law School later on in his life, and then president of FSU. He, in the late 70s, became an advocate for one of our clients, Channel 10, of cameras in the courtroom. And so Florida was the first state to have cameras in the courtroom. And then we had an experiment in the federal court in which I volunteered in civil cases to I think Grassley wanted to have us have cameras in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy was an amazing guy. He and I were boat partners, so there are always interconnections.
Yeah. No, Sandy was truly a Thomas Jefferson reincarnated. He had all of these thunderbolt ideas coming out of his head. But through that experience, I recognize the importance, as I said before, and it really pains me now to see real journalism sort of being crowded out by everybody with their opinion on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And no real hard work, double checking, and neutral reporting.
Wasn't too long ago where, well, maybe 15 years ago, Sarah Weddington was sitting right in the chair you're in.
No kidding.
Yeah, she-
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
I remember going up to her when I heard her speak many, many, many years later before I became a judge, and just saying, I was there in the courtroom, and I could even remember how she wore her hair and what the color of suit she was wearing.
Were you there long enough during the term to get, were you there when they announced the decision?
Yes.
You're surprised?
No, they announced the opinion in the summer months, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure the timing.
Because I was there for the oral argument. I think that I had graduated and had gone down to Florida to take the bar right before they announced the decision.
I'm gonna wrap up here, because I know you probably have dinner waiting for you back up there.
Yes.
So your very first Kansas State-Kansas game, do you remember that? Football game?
She's not a football fan.
Not a football fan.
We have an oral prenuptial agreement. She is devout Catholic, goes to mass every day.
Yep.
And part of our agreement, I would go to mass with her twice a year, Christmas and Easter counted. But in return, she had to go to 2 football games with me, because I thought that was an equal religious experience.
Yes.
And it's the only time I've gotten the better of her, because when you're in and out of mass in 55 minutes, it takes 5.5 hours for a football game.
Now, where do you go to the Dolphins games, or?
Yeah, the Dolphins.
Yeah.
But after 40 years, he goes to Mass with me every Sunday, and he no longer wants to watch football because he has great reservations. He loves the game, but he has great reservations about people getting brain injury for his entertainment.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've written this book.
And he's become a good shameless author.
God is, Alan Greer. In God is, Alan Greer makes the case, sweeping and impassioned, for the existence of a benevolent God. As a longtime atheist, I was challenged by his arguments and intrigued by his conclusions, which carry profound implications for the future of humanity, and that you quoted Dave Barry as part of your booklet there. So this is available, huh?
Yeah, on Amazon.
No kidding. Is it up at the bookstore?
Probably not.
You
Amazon.
could have written off the whole trip.
Well, while he's up here, he's working on book number 3.
Doing a fictional life of Jesus.
Oh, perfect.
To look at all the blank spaces.
Yeah.
And since they're blank, I can fill them any way I want to.
Absolutely. With impunity.
Yes.
That's great. So is
But coming back to the football game at K-State,
I was just curious. It was just a throwaway thing, because having gone to Kansas State, and of course its rival is Kansas, Wildcat, Jayhawks, all that stuff. I thought I'd hit a nerve, but I didn't.
no, when I was there, we didn't win a single game. And in fact, I was on the student senate, and I led the fight to not use student athletic funds to pay for the stadium. I lost by 1 vote. I almost got it. I almost got it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. Well, then we're not going to go down that college football road, am I? Yeah.
But everybody else in my family loves football.
Yeah.
And I'm the only sort of the outlier.
Pat's dad was a career Army officer. In World War II, at age 25, he was a lieutenant colonel commanding a battalion of paratroopers. Jumped into France, fought through the Battle of the Bulge. Had a Silver Star, 2 bronzes, and a Purple Heart. Stayed in and retired as a 3-star general, having commanded the 82nd Airborne Division in the 18th Airborne Corps. And he turned down his 4th star to retire.
He had left college at the end of his junior year in '39 and finished college while I was in high school. So he was an amazing human being. He and my mother met at Kansas State when my mother was a freshman and he was a junior. Mother finished college and graduated in the spring of '42 as a journalism major because she was a very good writer. And her father said, "There's a war on, I have no sons, go do something." So she joined the Red Cross. And she beat my dad to Europe. And that she was over there in '43 in England with the
8th Air Force bomber groups.
And then in the fall of '44, she was moved down to Holland to run the rest and recreation center. And she saw in the Stars and Stripes that Task Force Seitz was heavily engaged in the Battle of San Fifth.
The Battle of the Bulge.
And so she, at the age of 23 in that horrible blizzard winter, she took
She had
her...
a captured German staff car convertible that had been painted olive drab big white stars on it, by herself. 23 years old, she drives from Holland to the front lines in Belgium, manages to find the regimental headquarters for the 517th Parachute Regiment, says she's Betty Jean Merrill and she's there to see Dick Seitz. And they say, well, Betty, that's wonderful, but you can't go where he is because he's right on the front lines in the middle of the firefight. That put them in touch, back in physical touch. They've been writing each other. Dick used to say they were just good friends, but he named his first two Jeeps the Betty Jean. When they both got blown up, he quit naming his Jeeps Betty Jean. They took leave in Paris, and the last week of April '45, and Dick proposed in a backhanded way, said, if you want to get married, tell me, but we have to wait till the war's over because I don't want you to be a war widow.
Mhm.
He couldn't tell her. He was in training to go to the Pacific to lead the drops into the home invasion of home islands in Japan. June of '45, he gets this telegram, which Pat still has, that says, will arrive with bridesmaid, arrange wedding.
You're kidding.
And they are married. The two Red Cross gals, he found big orchid corsages for them, and 1,800 paratroopers in attendance.
Dad said it was the first time that they had been in Class A uniforms since training in Toccoa.
Isn't that a great story? Yeah, fabulous. Did you interview, did you do anything? Did you get that war story kind of captured?
Yep. My mother died very young, at the age of 57. But my dad was very devoted to his 517th, and they did. They captured it. I sort of stood in as my mother in the interview that they did with Dad.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And I actually met her father before I met her. The year I was in Vietnam as a Navy lieutenant. He was a two-star chief of staff to Westmoreland.
Mhm.
And I briefed him on an operation I had done, never knowing I'm looking at my future father-in-law. He had a way of putting me in my place. He said he could remember the briefing, but not the briefing officer, which was just fine, because the only reason he would have remembered me is if I had really mucked up.
Oh man, of all the gingerites in all the world, think about this. I mean, you ever think about the serendipity of life and how it intersects.
Yeah.
But it sort of is like your life as you tell your story of all of the things that you've discovered and just happenstance. Greg, you truly have a cohort of guardian angels that are all fluttering around you, and it's really our pleasure to have met you.
And I think we've bored you long enough. We've got
Oh my
to.
gosh, I had a different, I was looking forward to this conversation, but I sure as heck didn't think I'd be into B.B. Rebozo and Bush versus Gore or World War II.
Greg, you are a Renaissance man who has not only a vision as far as this museum is concerned, but a real visionary approach to sharing history and making it come alive. What a gift you have.
Got that in? This is good.
And we got to go.
Thank you so much. This has
Thank
been
you.
wonderful. Thank you for making this a reality.